Good afternoon. Today, at every Oslo Freedom Forum, we heard some amazing, heartbreaking stories about dissidents and human rights activists fighting for freedom and justice. But we think it's also important to hear from those who are in charge of foreign policy, because at the end of the day, we need most powerful democracy in the world to confront dictatorships with foreign policy that could be most effective in promoting these values. Alexander Solzhenitsyn and Andrei Sakharov both said that moral foreign policy is not just the right things to do in principle, but it's always happened to be the most effective one to achieve the objectives. And I summarized in my book, Winter is Coming, saying that most moral foreign policy is the most effective one. Today I have a pleasure to share the stage with Ambassador Kelly, a lifelong diplomat, remarkable 33 years in foreign service for his country. The last job was ambassadorship in the Republic of Georgia, and before the work in Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, and back to the 90s, the good old days when Russia had this brief attempt to democracy. He worked all across the former Soviet Union, coordinating American agencies. Now you are a professor at Northwestern University in Illinois, so you are free of the constraints of diplomatic service, and you can share your opinions about foreign policy. And I'd like to put it in both in just from today's perspectives and also historical context. Mm-hmm. It's a question of morality and advancing the cause of democracy and justice. Because we still hear voices that most effective policy is realpolitik. We should always look for most pragmatic approach, making no differences with deals made with democracies and dictatorships. So, what are your views?
Yeah. So, first of all, thank you, Gary, for inviting me here. It's a real honor to share the stage with you. I don't know if you're aware, Gary, but there's a lot of chaos in Washington right now. And there's a bit of an uncertainty.
I read this morning something.
A bit of uncertainty about the direction of U.S. foreign policy, but in a minute I want to show a video to show you just how mainstream the promotion of human rights has become in American diplomacy. But first I want to say that it wasn't always this way. In fact, really before World War II, diplomats were really very restrained from commenting at all on the internal affairs of a country. Ambassador William Dodd was rebuked and eventually recalled for calling out the Nazis for their treatment of Jews. World War II changed all that. I think because of the experience that we had with the rise of fascism, there was a recognition that internal repression really went hand in hand with external aggression. And this idea that our mutual security or security between states depends on respect for human rights within states was really enshrined in the mid-70s in the Helsinki Final Act. And so at that time, it became really legitimate for diplomats to comment on the internal human rights situation in the country because it really affected the security situation.
And it helped a lot of dissidents on the other side of the fence.
Well, that's the other part of it, it's still an ongoing
it had
concern.
A tremendous psychological effect, both for dissidents and human rights activists, but also on the repressive governments, because they recognize that they can no longer separate these issues, the international affairs and the domestic oppression.
So the Helsinki Final Act really enshrined this idea, but I think it would have remained on paper. Let's see if this works. Yes. Would have remained on paper if it weren't for the next two presidents. Jimmy Carter, shown here, really institutionalized the promotion of human rights. He set up the Bureau of Democracy and Human Rights in the State Department. He was the first president to meet with Russian dissidents. Here he's meeting with Vladimir Putin,
who was released because of Carter's interference.
Yes, yeah. He spent about 10 years in prison too, didn't he?
It's in and out. So
Psychiatric.
Yes, it's from 1962 to 14 years in and out. So it was a few months being free and then just brought back.
And then of course Carter was succeeded by Reagan, and Reagan continued this and made the explicit link publicly between progress in our bilateral relations with progress in respect for international conventions and human rights in Russia.
You, in your farewell speech in the Republic of Georgia, you quoted Reagan's famous line.
Yes, I did. Yeah, I'm impressed.
Freedom is never more.
You spent too much time on the internet.
One generation away from extinction. Yes.
Yes, that's
absolutely one of my favorites also.
One of mine too. So having set that up, as Garry said, I was the U.S. ambassador to the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, which was set up really to monitor this idea of a comprehensive approach to security, including human rights, and to show you how mainstream human rights promotion has become. I want to show you a quick video by diplomats, American diplomats in Vienna about Oleg Sentsov, who you may have heard of. He has been on hunger strike since May. He's a prisoner of conscience.
It's already just 4 months.
About 4 months, yeah. Anyway, inshallah, this will work.
And Sentsov himself, during his trial, gave testimony detailing the treatment he received in custody, including alleged beatings, strangulation, and suffocation with plastic bags.
Russian authorities refuse to open an investigation into these claims. Sentsov's imprisonment is a miscarriage of justice.
It is part of Russia's campaign to silence voices speaking out against its occupation and attempted annexation of Crimea.
To quash dissent and intimidate Crimeans into self-censorship.
Meanwhile, Sentsov languishes in a Russian prison.
He has been on hunger strike since May 14th.
Today we add our voices to the global call to save Oleg Sentsov and call again on Russia to release him immediately, along with all other Crimean political prisoners, and allow him to return home.
But we do not have Carter and Reagan to make this call. So what do we do?
Well, you've pointed out, I think, the concern that a lot of people have, that while at the institutional level in the State Department there continues a real emphasis on human rights, and in the U.S. Congress as well, there are, shall we say, mixed signals coming from the White House.
That's very diplomatic.
Well, it's only been a few months since I've left the diplomatic service, so old habits die hard. But you mentioned the importance of publicly highlighting the plight of prisoners of conscience like Oleg Sentsov.
And many others. We have Alexei Pichugin. So this is a long list of political prisoners in Russia, and they've barely been mentioned.
Yeah. You know, before I went to the OSCE in 2010, and before I went, I met with Max Kampelman, and I had heard that there was a lot of difficulty in the OSCE in getting some of our allies to sign on to statements of support for human rights activists in Russia and Belarus. And so I asked him, what did you do back in, I think he was there in the early 80s. And he said that he found real value just in highlighting these cases. I mean, of course, he would ask the embassy in Moscow to make sure that it was okay with their families for a senior U.S. diplomat to highlight their situations. But he said about 10 years ago, he was in New York, and he was speaking on, an event like this, and a gentleman came up to him and said, "Thank you." He said, "Well, what did I do?" And he said, this guy with a heavy Russian accent said, "You help keep me alive. I was a prisoner of conscience, and Radio Liberty highlighted your statement at the OSCE, and somebody came and told me about it, and he said it gave him hope. So it's important for us as Americans to stand publicly with those who are putting their well-being or even their lives on the line for values that are at the very foundation of our country.
This crowd now. There's many of these people in this audience.
Yeah.
They're doing exactly that, and they're expecting America and other most powerful democracies in the world just not to come to their rescue, but not to ignore them and not to make deals at their expense.
Right. Yeah, I mean, clearly there are times when we have to be quiet about certain situations because of sensitive diplomatic deals that are going on. That's in public, but in private, I feel very confident in saying that my colleagues are raising these issues, and they're empowered.
Do you think it's effective to raise it in private? Does Putin care? Okay, I speak about Russia, but
well, you should tell me that. I mean,
my answer is no.
Yeah.
I have very strong opinions about this issue, because I always say that I might be still playing for the Soviet Union had Reagan made a deal with Gorbachev.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the?
No, let's look. I know my views are well known, but again, I just want to hear. So, what are the chances that the United States and other Western allies will, incorporate the morality, the values of human rights, and those values that helped to win the Cold War?
Yes.
It was not just technological advance on economic superiority, but it's the moral values. Because people on the other side of the Iron Curtain, they looked at America, they looked at the free world as a chance for freedom, and also it's an opportunity to build our own lives. And we knew that there were people who cared. Right now, I doubt that people who are fighting, and they're facing the new kind of authoritarian regimes that are very skillful in using modern technology and manipulating public opinion. By the way, also attacking democracies, ironically, by using the technology that have been invented in the free world to attack the very foundation of the free world. So people in Russia, in Iran, in China, in Turkey, again, to name just few, in Venezuela, they don't feel the same kind of psychological connection to those who are so lucky to be born and raised in the free world. And unfortunately, many of Americans or Europeans, they don't recognize how lucky you are.
Yeah.
So they pretend it's all all your rights that you inherited, and you don't have to fight for them.
Yeah.
And now we could see this illiberal trend that the West has been ignoring for so long. It's potentially can carry away the democratic institutions in this country or across the Atlantic.
Yeah. Well, Garry, I'm very glad I don't have to defend the policy of this administration anymore. But I will say that the idea of human rights protection has been really mainstreamed, institutionalized. There is, I think, one important voice which is not being heard. I think, I showed pictures of Carter and Reagan with human rights defenders. I could also show pictures of Clinton and the two Bushes and Obama meeting with human rights defenders too.
Okay.
With very I know.
I wouldn't put them
with
on
varying degrees of commitment to the idea, but
yes.
But I think
it's
that
8 years of Obama actually that convinced Putin that he could attack this country and to install his sympathizer in the Oval Office. So and unfortunately, again, we saw since the end of the Cold War, we saw very little desire, no political will to defend these values.
Yeah.
So that I could start counting many deals made by Bush 41, Clinton, Bush 43, Obama, And I could hardly mention any major successes
Yeah.
in defending human rights and democracy worldwide, as we could see with Carter and Reagan, for instance.
Yeah. But again, I think you're talking about one man here who hasn't really let his
But I
voice
want,
be
I
heard.
want, I want you
There-
just, to give us some confidence that next administration will be more receptive to what we're discussing now. Do we still have hope? Or they will look for new deals with China, with whoever is rising on the horizon?
I will say that the experience of the last, whatever it is, year and a half has really made us Americans really appreciate the strength of our
Okay,
institutions.
thanks to Trump.
Thanks to Trump. Yes, we haven't used his
Now
name
you
yet, I
understand.
don't
Now
think.
you
Yeah.
understand.
Thanks.
That democratic institutions could be in danger, and you don't feel comfortable.
Well,
Good.
our democratic institutions are in danger. I mean,
Okay.
we have really a daily drumbeat or tweet beat of attacks against our judiciary, against our independent media. But in many ways, I
So
think
you understand
that has
the world is it's in globalized world. You cannot separate domestic affairs and international affairs.
Yes.
And abandoning the fight for the values worldwide, you are endangering your own well-being as citizens. of the
I think there's an
country.
appreciation. I think you just have to look at some of the votes in Congress to really, I think, over the head of the president, impose sanctions on the Russian Federation.
Okay, we're running out of time, so just you
running
have
out of
30
time.
seconds. Just make us feel good about the future.
Well, I would just say that one thing about my country that I feel very good about, and that's the ability of the system that was set up by our founding fathers in the late 1700s, is the ability of the system to really to adapt. And unfortunately, we have seen a real polarization of politics in the United States, and a move toward what people call in shorthand, realpolitik, especially in the White House. But I have faith in our system to make that adjustment and bring us back to some of those core values. And if there are American citizens out there, vote in November. I think that's the best way you
to
can
restore the shining house on the hill.
What's that?
To restore the shining house on the hill.
Oh, Shannon, that's another great quote of Reagan's that I love.
Actually, it's probably a Bible, but anyway.
Well,
Okay. Thank you very much.
thank you.
Thank you.
Gary. Thank you very much.